going to talk about high-performance teams here on the top of Nunau Mountain in Kauai. Let's first of all just discuss real briefly what a high-performance project team is so that you understand why we want them. A high-performance project team is not all wine and roses, but it has team members who, maybe half the time or close to it, may finish early on their assignments, as opposed to the average project team where no one finishes early, but some people do finish late. Why does that happen? Because there's no incentive to finish early. In fact, there's a disincentive to finish early because you just get another task. High-performance project team, there are incentives for finishing early. And that's a heck of a good thing for project managers to have, because it gives you sort of a built-in offset to those tasks that just by luck of the draw are going to finish late, and you have some that are going to finish early, and there's some netting of the impact. So that set of attitudes on the part of project team members is one aspect of high performance. Another aspect of high performance is that we have a culture that is rewarding of achievement, and people value other team members because they achieve things for the project. And that's another aspect of it. Now, we have to have rewards, we have to have the right kind of culture, but then we get a team that is interested in finishing the project on time, interested in producing valuable deliverables, not just filling time away from their regular jobs. That's why a high-performance project team is worth having. Now let's talk about how we go about getting one. Okay, the foundation for high-performance project teams is appropriate authority for the project manager. We talked about that at length in the first module, how we go about getting authority to directly assign work, because I can't make good assignments to the project team members if I'm not directly assigning them their work. If I'm going through a second or third party here, the definition of the assignment, the tailoring of the assignment to the individual is not going to be as good as if I'm doing it directly. The second thing is I need to be able to reward good performance, like finishing early. And I have to have a reward authority to do that. So the authority stuff we talked about is the foundation for a high-performance team. And frankly, it's one of the ways you sell it to top management, is to say, on these strategic initiatives where we really need great performance to pull them off, we have to have authority as the foundation for managing a high-performance team. Our first step, assuming we have this authority to make assignments, is to make good ones. And we want to make assignments that are well matched to the capability of the individual. So we have to be able to assess that capability. How ready are they for various kinds of assignments? More complicated, longer duration. Are they ready to handle one of those? We want people's assignments to be a little bit of a stretch, so we have intrinsic motivation. The task itself is motivating. It's a challenge, and they get it done, and they feel good about it. I'm just saying just a little bit, because that's certainly better than the task being boring or so big that it's frightening. And we want to craft the assignment properly for the person, so we get some of that intrinsic motivation. We also want to craft the reward. We make clear what the achievement is. We define outstanding performance. We'll talk about that in a bit, but outstanding performance may be finishing 20% early or achieving 20% more in the specified time. So we define that as outstanding performance, and then define what the reward for that performance is. So everything starts with making good assignments, and we make the assignment, we give the team member a chance to participate in setting the estimate, which is the standards for outstanding performance, so they feel it's fair. They've had some skin in the game in the sense of making the estimate, and that's our first step. We've made a good assignment to a project team member, and that tease up our high-performance team. As we talked a couple of modules back, there are a number of kinds of authority project manager can have over his or her team members. And you as the portfolio or program manager have to be working to secure appropriate authority for that project manager so they have a chance to make good assignments and establish the foundation for a high-performance team. So if we have somebody, as an example, who's going to be working full-time on the project for 6 months for half of their year, you want to take a shot at carving out full superior subordinate accountability and authority for at least half of the person's year. So your project manager would determine half of their performance raise. That gives the project manager authority, and that also gives the project manager rewards to give the team member for their project work, which makes that work a matter of consequence to the team member. And that's the kind of authority we'd like. Can we always get a superior subordinate? No. We may have to back down a little bit. And there are 7 levels, as you've seen, and drop down a couple of notches depending how long the assignment duration is and whether it's full-time or part-time commitment. We're obviously not going to get full superior subordinate authority when somebody's working on a project for 3 weeks half-time. But we'd still like to be able to make an assignment directly to the person and maybe own that half-time each week that they're working on the project. And within that time, we can make assignments. That protects the team member from from being pulled off onto other work. If we own, your project manager owns, 8 to noon, Monday through Friday for the first 3 weeks of June, and within that time frame, they can make assignments directly to the person, we've still got a pretty good set of authorities and have some of our assignment tools available to us. Now let's contrast those higher levels of authority with the bottom of the pecking order. When we have in the hopper, the only authority we have is that some functional manager or line manager has agreed to take the project task and put it in the hopper and assign it to somebody as soon as somebody frees up to do it. Obviously, we're not getting a lot of high priority attention paid to it. One notch slightly higher is when a functional manager agrees, okay, you can assign this to Chris, and you and Chris work it out. And then we have an authority level that we call persuasion. You have no formal authority over this, Chris. You can't make Chris work on your task at a certain period of time. You need to persuade Chris. And when I say you, I mean your project manager is having to persuade people to do the work on the project, and they're not in a very good position to motivate the team member or get the work done on time. So the bottom of that authority accountability ranking is a very bad place to be, and hopefully you put your project managers in a situation where they have to manage down there only on very short duration tasks that hopefully are off the critical path. Then they can't do too much damage. So once you've carved out the appropriate authority for your project managers, then they need to be taught how to assess the capability of their team members. And you're going to have to help them with this in the beginning until they get better at it. A lot of times on projects, we equate capability with technical knowledge. And that's certainly part of the question. But the other parts of it are, what sort of standards for productivity and quality does the person have? They may be a technical guru and know much more about this than you do or your project managers. But if they have low standards of productivity and quality and their attention drifts and they're off doing other things or they're expanding the assignment way beyond what you want, those people cannot be given a long duration assignment. You need to pull it back, have your project managers pull it back, so that they don't get too far afield before each checkpoint when they have a deliverable. So we're making an assessment of a person's technical ability, their personal standards for productivity and quality, and their ability to solve problems independently. We'll talk about locus of control later on, and that's what we're getting at here, is the ability for a person to figure out a way around an obstacle. And we all know people who are unable to do it. They hit an obstacle, and they are dead stopped till someone comes and shows them the way around. And there are other people who keep trying and trying and trying and trying to find a way around and eventually do. And those are people who have strong, independent problem-solving ability. I'm not going to give a person who is not good at that a 3-week assignment, because I could lose 2.5 of those weeks as they are unable to find their way around an obstacle and don't call for help. So I'm going to assess all of those things: technical knowledge, standards for productivity and quality relative to the project managers, and also that ability to solve problems independently. Based on that capability assessment, your project managers are going to make several different kinds of assignments. At the low end, people who are not technically expert, don't have good productivity and quality standards, and or are not good independent problem solvers, you're going to want your project managers to be assigning them tasks that are 2 to maybe 5 days of duration. That's the subtask level. If moving up a notch at the task level, we'd give them maybe 7 to 10 days duration assignment. And as we have more and more capable people, we give them bigger and bigger assignments. We want to give them bigger and bigger assignments. Why? One, those more capable people will have more challenge and more job satisfaction from working on bigger, more difficult assignments that have meaningful achievements. So the other thing it does is the project manager is going to spend much less time with that person. They're not going to be micromanaging them, which gives the team member a sense of freedom and independence, which is good. And it saves time for your project managers to focus on the people who are having the 2-day assignments, who are not as capable, and the project manager works with those individuals to develop their skills and also much more closely monitor their performance. So using the capability assessments and crafting the right size assignments for people has all kinds of benefits in terms of project manager efficiency and also motivation of the team. I think we need to watch out for project managers who want to motivate everybody, and they have strong performers. The superstars on their project team are not going to like having their work checked every 2 days. So you need to ensure that doesn't happen. We've talked about doing that capability assessment and then how we use it in the assignments. Now let's drill down a little bit further into assessing people's capability. We're going to look at 2 dimensions, and one is how they deal with cognitive complexity. And we have sort of 3 levels of people that we encounter on project teams most often. And we have procedure followers who can follow 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 through 26 steps in a procedure. As long as it's laid out, they do a very good job of making sure they complete every step. These people are very, very valuable. We shouldn't think they are lesser team members, because on projects there are a lot of things that have to be done in a very step-by-step process with no particular creativity and certainly no reinvention of the wheel. And your procedure followers, you can trust not to do that. And so we want those people on the project team. And they will come to you if you don't manage them properly. If you put too much of a burden to invent ways of doing the job, they'll be very frustrated. They're the ones who are most comfortable when you give them a work package that has the 26 steps they're supposed to do. And they'll complain about it and be very frustrated if they don't know what to do next, because they are not people who will figure it out for themselves. We want procedure followers, and we want to manage them the right way with relatively short-term assignments that are completely detailed out. We've been very clear about what the deliverables we want for them at every step of the process. Another group of people, equally valuable, are serial processors. They deal with cognitive complexity by adapting a previously successful procedure to the new circumstances and then following the revised steps. So these people like to exercise a bit more creativity in sort of adapting what they've been assigned using their knowledge or the procedures you have given them, adapting them to the circumstances and then following them. These people do not respond well when you don't let them adapt the process they are following. You need to allow them a little slack. That is rewarding for them, and frankly, you get their best work when they start thinking about how to do things and making suggestions about a better way to do it, and you accept them. You wind up with a very motivated team member because you've recognized how they deal with cognitive complexity, and you're allowing them to follow their natural habits and inclinations for doing that. So serial processors, we need to allow to adapt their procedures to achieve the end result. They're not changing the end result, but they're figuring out little bit different ways to get to it. So we have our procedure followers who we don't want to ask to make adaptations to the procedure. Serial processors who we do want to allow some room in making adjustments. And those are our first two categories of how people deal with cognitive complexity. Our third group deals with cognitive complexity by seeing one or more end results to their assignment and plotting different paths how to get there. They're not adapting a previous procedure like the serial processors, nor are they following a procedure like our procedure followers. They are seeing the result and conceiving paths to reach it. Now you say, well, gee, those are going to be very bright and creative people, and you're absolutely right. Do I want a project team full of them? No. There's a lot of control needs to be exercised over your conceptual thinkers, or you may find out that you have a project with a whole different end result because they've replanned the whole thing for you. You want to allow them to do that thinking. You want to give them tasks that require that kind of big picture conceptual thinking. But we also need to control them by specifying what the end result is. And if they can figure out a better way to get to the end result you want, great. Let them take it. But don't let them change the end result for you. So each of these three kinds of thinkers have great value to the project, and frankly, having a mix of all three is probably the best. We need to be able to listen to how they talk, listen to what they complain about and want to do, and figure out which of the three categories they fit into so we can manage them the right way. And you need to coach your project managers in the handling of these people. If you have, as an example, team members who are complaining because there's no direction, they don't know what they're doing, they're afraid of making a mistake, well, the alarm bell should go off in your mind. You've got project managers who have procedure followers who are not giving them adequate procedures to follow. If I hear complaints about creativity being stifled, that may be your serial processors not having an opportunity to adapt the procedure using their experience to get the job done. And you may hear similar kinds of complaints from your conceptual thinkers who are talking about how this whole project is aimed at the wrong end result. And all of those are symptoms of project managers who are not recognizing how these people deal with cognitive complexity and handling them in a way that makes them effective. And that's, of course, what you want on all of your project teams. Okay, we've talked about how people deal with cognitive complexity. Procedure followers, serial adapters, and conceptual thinkers. Now let's change our sight. There's a whole nother dimension we want to use in assessing the capability of our project teams. And that is a concept called locus of control, which is scandalously underutilized by project managers, I think largely because there's a lot of human resource concerns that we may discriminate among people or against people. I think that's certainly not the case, and the research into locus of control is incredibly compelling in terms of the difference between people with internal locus of control, that is, they see themselves as the source of energy and power in their world, and they're accountable for what happens to them because they are that source of power. So those people we call internal locus of control people. Now this is a continuum, but at the other end of the continuum are people with external locus of control, and they see the power in their lives coming from external forces. They're not responsible for what happens to them. The research on LOC, locus of control, is very interesting. Prisons are full of people with external locus of control who feel powerless in their world, feel they are the victims of other sources of influence. Upper ranks of management in any organization, profit-making, government, non-profit organization, upper levels of management are full of people with internal locus of control, because those are the people who take control of their lives. They are the relentless problem solvers. If you have a strong external locus of control, you hit up against an obstacle, you stop, because you can't fix it. If you have internal locus of control, you're like a game where the ball bounces against an obstacle and finally bounces, finds a way around. That's internal locus of control. Let me tell you a story to illustrate this. Went to the movies with my wife, and we sit down, and she says to me, "It's cold in here. Would you go talk to the movie manager and have him turn the heat up a little bit?" And I said, "Come on, the manager's not going to turn the heat up just because you're cold." So we just have to grin and bear it. So with that, my wife gets up, walks out. Movie starts. I'm watching the movie. Maybe 10 minutes later, I suddenly feel this gush of warm air being pumped into the theater. And my wife comes back with a singularly smug expression on her face. I had operated with an external locus of control in that circumstance by just saying that there's nothing I can do about it. She had been very internal LOC. And she said, "I'm the source of power. I'll go get the heat turned down here." And she did. Now, do the internal locus of control people succeed all the time? No. As a matter of fact, they fail much more often than people with an external locus of control because they try so many things. Internal LOC people are constantly like the pinball machine, trying to get around the obstacle and eventually do, but they may fail 15 times. The external locus of control, again, the extreme external locus of control, tries once, it is stopped, and stays there, waits for somebody else to fix it. So, being able to assess that, and again, it's a continuum. No one is absolutely internal, no one is absolutely external. No one is internal their whole life. No one is external their whole life. People change. People will bring to your project team a locus of control that they've developed on previous project teams. And if they've been micromanaged and encouraged to make no decisions, but always run to the project manager for any decision, you're going to have people with a more external locus of control. If they've worked for project managers who have encouraged independent problem solving and creative problem solving, they'll be more internal. We also have situations in life where a strongly internal locus of control person loses a loved one. And for some period of months, they may become very external because the loss of that loved one convinces them that they are powerless in the world, and it just takes them a while to come back. So these things change, and the way you manage people can encourage a more internal attitude. You're probably saying, what does it have to do with making assignments? Well, it has a lot to do with making assignments, because no matter how brilliant a technical person you are, if you have a strong external locus of control, I'm going to give you relatively short assignments. On the other hand, I'm going to be more willing to trust people with an internal locus of control with larger assignments, because I know they're going to be relentless problem solvers. So we have a couple of tools here for assessing capability and give us information to tailor people's assignments. One is how they deal with cognitive complexity, and the other is how they deal with the external world, with their locus of control. We'll talk next about how I figure out where people are on those continuum. All right, now how do we figure out where a person is in terms of their ability to deal with cognitive complexity and where they are in terms of their locus of control? Well, there are test instruments available, but there are obviously some difficulties in using those on project team members, particularly when they don't report to you. But we can always listen to people talk. We listen to them talk about previous projects they have worked on, and particularly the problems they may have had on those projects. If I am listening to somebody talk, and they're saying things like, well, yes, I finished late, but it was because Jim didn't do his part, and I had to wait for him, and then Mary screwed up the report, and that caused me big problems, and so I got blamed for it, and I finished late. Well, I'm listening to somebody with an external locus of control, aren't I? This doesn't mean they're not assertive people. They may be very angry about Jim and Mary, okay? And you may be thinking, boy, this is a person who really cares, they're dynamic. But if they're seeing problems in terms of what other people did, we've got an external locus of control. The other thing you may hear from them is, well, I went and talked to John, and I explained everything we're going to do on the project, and John just didn't understand. That's what a person with an external locus of control, how they see that situation. Let's flip-flop. A person with an internal locus of control, who also had to meet with John, would come back and say, I didn't do as good a job as I should have done in presenting the information in a way Jim could understand. You see how they're taking responsibility for it? The internal locus of control person always sees themselves in control, and they take responsibility for the fact that that user didn't understand. And they're saying, okay, how can I next time go back there and explain it in a different way that would click and connect with him? That's the internal locus of control problem solver. And it wasn't that John was late with his predecessor, but it's that I didn't coordinate with John so we could work out and me get his deliverable on time. They're taking responsibility for that stuff too. So external locus of control, internal locus of control, you listen to them talk about what they took responsibility for or who they blame for the results. When we're listening for people's way of dealing with cognitive complexity, what we're listening for is people who are saying things like, well, the procedure wasn't clear, I wasn't told what to do next, so it's not my fault that I didn't do the right thing. What am I listening to? A procedure follower, right? If I hear somebody say, well, I had some great ideas that would have gotten us around this problem, but the project manager wouldn't let me implement them. I had to stick to the rules of the way she wanted it, and so of course we were late. That's your serial processor. And your conceptual person is talking about, Well, we really took the wrong path. It would have been much easier if we'd gone the subdivision route rather than the multiplication route, and that would have gotten us to the end result much faster with a more satisfied customer. That's your conceptualize. You're talking about the end result and ways to get there. Listening to people talk is the way we slot them, at least roughly, and make our judgments about what kind of assignments. That information gets refined over time as you work with them more, and so you may make adjustments in the assignments, but those are the two tools we use to craft the right size assignment for people. It's raining here, and I hope you appreciate how we have not stopped the lectures. The camera crew's a little surly. They're wet, but we do it for you. We're continuing with the lecture. We've talked about the need for authority to make good assignments. We've talked about ways to assess the capability of people so we can give them the right size assignment, and all of this is reflected in our assignment grid, which you see. We don't want to manage everybody the same way. If there's one lesson from all this stuff, is to have a highly motivated, high-performance project team. We've got to manage these people differently. We need to consider their locus of control, their ways of dealing with complexity, and craft an assignment that fits them. We want it to be challenging and rewarding when they deliver it on time, and so we have to have at least some insight into their overall capability. I've mentioned a couple of times the idea of intrinsic motivation. Why do we want to play for some of that? Because it's free. If we can craft an assignment for an individual where achieving it, delivering it, is something that makes them feel good about themselves, it's a meaningful achievement for them, then we get what's called intrinsic motivation. The job itself is rewarding to the individual, and that may be the only reward you have or your project managers have. So that's why we make assignments that can be intrinsically motivating, one of the real foundations for a high-performance project team. The other kind of motivation is incentive motivation, and there are possibilities as we're in different positions on that assignment grid. There are possibilities for intrinsic motivation at the higher level assignments. When I'm giving somebody one-day tasks, they're probably not going to find those rewarding unless they're a brand new person, in which case they will. But if someone is not sufficiently competent to get a challenging assignment, maybe they think they're competent, but they're not, then we are not going to get much intrinsic motivation, and we have to deal with reward motivation, which is the other side of that coin. That's where they are earning something specific by the completion of their assignment on time and on a budget. And those are the two kinds of motivation we have in our assignment grid. Everything we've just talked about is applicable to your project managers as well. Designing the right kind of project assignments for them that fits their ability to deal with cognitive complexity, that fits their internal locus of control, external locus of control. You want to manage your project managers in a way that rewards internal locus of control. You want people to, as your project managers, who are aggressive and relentless problem solvers. And so, let's think about it for a minute. If I am rewarding a good excuse, the same as trying 15 times and still failing, what am I encouraging? The external locus of control. I want to recognize the fact that these people who are constantly solving and trying to solve and get around obstacles are my internal locus of control, and I want to reward that behavior, not reward giving up. That's particularly true among your project managers. And all the ideas I'm going to talk about in terms of reward and incentive compensation are as applicable to your project managers as they are to your team members. Now let's talk about making rewards incentives. There's a ton of money wasted in project management with rewards that have no incentive impact on performance. Let me give you the classic example, and then we'll talk about the rules you have to follow to make rewards motivating for your project managers and their team members. Classic bad example of a project reward is the project pizza party at the end of the project. Happens all the time. It's announced 2 days before the party, so people don't know about it while they're working on the project. They hear about it after the work is done. They come to the party, they get 4 pieces of cold pizza, and that's their reward for all these hours of overtime. But it had absolutely no incentive effect on their behavior because, for one thing, they didn't know it was coming. Second thing, everybody got the same reward, except maybe the lucky few who didn't come. You get 2 rewards, and if you do badly, you get 3. 3 pizza parties, and only 2 if you do a good job. So there was no knowledge of it in advance, so people would know what they'd get if they succeeded. Everybody got the same thing, so there was no discrimination. And the rewards had very little value to the individuals involved. And those are all violations of the rules about rewards. Let's go through and talk about each one. Rewards have to be legitimate. They need to be perceived by everybody on the project team as earned, fairly earned. And the first rule is that rewards and the criteria for winning them or earning them have to be announced before the fact. So if I'm going to give people a piece of cold pizza, I have to describe what the criteria are for earning it, and that is you're going to finish 20% early on your task. That's the criteria, and what you're going to win is the cold piece of pizza. That is pre-existing. People know what the criteria are before they start work. And so the reward, if somebody gets it, and they may not be cheering about the cold piece of pizza, but it will be seen as a legitimate reward. And if Mary gets it because she finished 20% early and no one else does, the fact that she gets the pizza is seen as legitimate. If we just give the reward out to somebody, to give Jim a reward of a day off, and there was no pre-existing criteria, people think it is favoritism and unfair. It's not seen as legitimate. And because we don't meet the pre-existing criteria, project managers wind up giving everybody the same reward, because they can't defend the legitimacy of giving it just to Jim, because they didn't define what success criteria was for earning the reward. Sounds pretty simple, but project managers violate this all the time. And then let's think about what the impact of giving everybody the same reward. The second criteria is that the rewards need to be public. Everybody needs to know about them. The fact that so-and-so is going to get a reward shouldn't be a surprise. We should see, before we start work, what the criteria are for the reward, and we should see the measured progress towards earning this publicly. The tracking Gantt chart can be posted up in the organization so everybody can see who's scheduled to finish early on their assignment. So by making it public, there are no surprises, and again, that improves the legitimacy of the reward. If the rewards are pre-existing, so we know what's coming, we watch people earn them because the data is public, then the rewards seem legitimate. They seem earned. The person who got them earned a reward. This also means that I can't give everybody a reward. We only give people a reward who have met the criteria we set up in advance, which means you have to work through the fact that you'll have some team members who don't get rewards when they finish their tasks. And that is what makes the rewards more valuable for those that have won them, because they are perceived as being earned and legitimate, and that increases the value. If we've met all the preceding criteria, the reward is seen as legitimate. Everybody may not have won it. In fact, everybody hasn't won it. It's not the same because performance is not the same. But if everybody perceives the reward as legitimate, the value to the recipient is increased, and the incentive for the whole team is increased. Remember, when I reward somebody for finishing 20% early, I'm not just rewarding them, but I'm also creating an incentive for the other people to finish early so they can get the reward. And you may have noticed, I haven't talked about what the reward is. The reward could be a little plaque where the project manager says, you did outstanding work on task 127 in our industry competitive project. It may be nothing that has any real material value, but if the person who gets it and everybody else on the project team feels it is a legitimate reward, it will have value to the people. They will feel good about themselves, feeling that they have achieved something because they have won it. And that's what we're looking for. Most times your project managers are not going to have barrels of money to hand out. But their praise, whether it's in the form of a certificate or just public recognition in a meeting, that Sally finished 20% early on the last assignment, if it's legitimate and everybody says, gee, Sally did, we watched her do it, we saw her performance week after week as she was finishing early and ahead of schedule, and we saw her earn it, and that's a great job. It makes Sally feel better about the reward she received, and that's what we're looking for. We're looking to make a motivation and incentive out of basically thin air, because you don't have money to hand out. Whatever rewards we have, and it may be nothing more than lunch with the sponsor or a well done from the project manager in public, we want them to be pre-existing. We want them, the progress to earning the reward, to be public. We want them to be legitimate, seen as legitimate by everyone, and then the reward will be valued. And there are some wonderful success stories. I've had projects where the only reward I had was sugar-coated pink donuts. And I gave people who had met the outstanding criteria a pink donut at the team meeting on Friday mornings. And in the beginning, everybody thought it was silly. By the end of the project, people felt very good about themselves when they won that valueless donut. But the legitimacy and the public nature of it, and the pre-existing nature of it, made the donut have more value to them than its inherent value. It isn't a matter of having pink donuts. That's not the key. It's setting up the reward program so that people feel good about winning the reward, and that's what we're looking for. Why do people behave as they do on your project, which may be very different from the way they behave back in their home department or when they're at home on the weekend? And it's because people, all human beings, play schema, which is a psychological term, and it's a set of behaviors and attitudes and even language that we apply to particular circumstances. And if people are on a lot of projects, have in their history been on a lot of projects, they'll have a project schema they will bring to yours. And then when you start managing your project team, you have the opportunity right in the beginning to mold the schema that your team members will have, or your project manager's team will have on this project. At the beginning is not the time to back off and let things happen among the team. In the beginning is when you want to start laying out these rewards, and you have your project managers have some sort of a reward and incentive program on the project, and they are enforcing standards of behavior in the team meetings from day one. because that's when people are most susceptible to adapting the way they behave on projects. If you back off in the beginning, your project manager is going to have to live with the behaviors the team members brought in with them. If on day one you encourage them to be very active about the standards about reporting problems, the standards about getting in status data, the expectations for participation in estimating and risk identification, and all of those things are made clear, and you're stopping inappropriate behavior in the meetings. You're not letting it go. If people from two different departments that have a history of conflict start having conflict in your project team meeting, you stop it in the first meeting. That's when you have the opportunity to bring it to an end. If you let it happen for a month, you're never going to be able to end it. So we need to be very proactive in affecting the culture of the project team, and the assignments and the rewards and our assessment of the capability of individuals are all key parts of developing a high-performance team culture.